Hello, my name is Dr. Yamonja Smalls, and I'm the DDA Director of Professional Development, and will be presenting today's training on case notes, which includes guidance regarding both activity and progress notes. Given all the important and challenging work you do to support people with developmental disabilities, it's important to ensure that your service is documented appropriately. This training will provide a basic overview of case note expectations for CCSs in Maryland. We will cover case note documentation, expectations for what should be included in an activity note, and give some examples of good activity notes that need some work. Okay, let's begin. DDA's coordination of community services assists individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families learn about and gain access to resources and supports in their community. CCSs help and assist the individuals for planning for their future. As we are all aware, there's lots of work packed into these two generalized responsibilities. In all of the work that you do as a CCS on a daily basis, there may be many challenges to writing good case notes. In the prioritized responsibilities you carry, you may sometimes feel like you can't find time to write your notes. Your own feelings about a situation at the time may impact what's written. Perhaps you've waited to document and it's hard to remember exactly what's occurred. This training will provide a core overview of what's needed to ensure that you document appropriately. Case management involves much collaborations where the CCSs conduct assessments, facilitate person-centered plan development, coordinate resources and supports for the person in services or seeking to be enrolled in a waiver. The CCSs monitor and evaluate service implementation, and they're always assessing participant and family satisfaction so that the changes may be incorporated into the person-centered plan as needed. The CCS's documentation provides interpretations based on interactions with the participant. They provide a sequential account of what's going on in the person's life. They note progress made towards achieving chosen outcomes, and their documentation supports quarterly reviews and the annual PCP development. Let's review a few points about why case notes are important. Case notes summarize assessments highlighting relevant data. They should provide an accurate snapshot of a person's functioning. These notes may identify challenges and should point to potential supports and services which the person may need or want. Good case notes lend to good internal agency follow-up, oversight, and improved service to the participant. This is useful to your CCS agency, but also to the DDA. Issues documented may suggest needed changes to policies and procedures. While the actual sharing of case notes is limited due to HIPAA, participant records, which include case notes, may be subpoenaed by the court system and may also be requested by the participant or designated representative at any time to better understand what has been documented regarding a CCS or other provider of service. Of course, your supervisor has access along with the DDA, but it's important to remember that others may require access as well. Activity and progress notes, which are specific kinds of case notes we will be discussing, help to optimize referrals and increase communication between the participant, family, and providers when appropriate. Good documentation supports the participant and their chosen team, including providers selected, achieve the person's chosen outcomes. When documentation isn't specific and thorough, planning can be inadequate and result in the person not moving along the trajectory toward living their good life. The CCS has an ethical responsibility to accurately document services delivered. As you are a conflict-free provider responsible for efficiently tracking whether a person is achieving those chosen outcomes, thorough receipt of waiver services must be documented. You've all heard the statement, if it isn't documented, it did not happen. As the monitor of the monitor, the DDA is responsible for monitoring your compliance with the requirement for documenting your service. That said, the DDA conducts a quality review of samples of case notes, which should be reviewed regularly by your agency as well. It's crucial that these notes are supported with documentation within the LTSS Maryland system. So, in addition to wanting to be sure that only appropriate billable services are documented within the notes, the DDA is also looking to verify that the service was actually rendered with that supporting documentation in LTSS. DDA's regional office, headquarters, CMS, OIG, Office of Legislative Audit, all have and can be granted access to LTSS and are able to review notes as needed for monitoring, auditing, and investigative purposes. Remember, as stated before, you may be required to read your written note in court. If a new coordinator within your agency was assigned to cover your case, would they be able to follow the person's progress? Notes typically have a participant detailed section, a type of contact, whether it's a phone call or occurs through a virtual platform, email, fax, etc. While there are multiple ways to think about what needs to be captured in a note, they should provide a summary of the focus issue or reason for the contact and service delivery. It should provide an action plan specifying who's responsible for the next steps and a plan for the next meeting or follow-up. Some of the forms, for example, of documentation include case notes, which consist of both activity notes and progress notes, comprehensive assessments, quarterly monitoring and follow-up forms, assessments such as behavioral treatment plans, which may be submitted to the CCS by a team of professionals such as the RN, physician, behavior analyst, etc. In this training, we are focusing on the case note documentation. The others mentioned support the service delivered in the LTSS Maryland system. So we mentioned that the case notes consist of both activity and progress notes. What's the difference between activity notes and progress notes? Activity notes are the billable activities that a CCS documents which describe what services were performed to support the waiver participant. As before mentioned, activity notes must be supported by other forms of documentation in LTSS in order to be verified during the quality review period. Billing, which occurs in 15-minute increments, are only pulled from claims generated from activity notes. Billing does not occur through progress note documentation. At this time, activity notes are not viewable by any CCS from other agencies in the event that the case is transferred from one agency to another agency. However, a new CCS is able to view progress notes. Summarizing quarterly monitoring and follow-up in the progress notes makes it easier for the current CCS to prepare for the annual PCP, as it can provide a basic overview of the year, highlight ongoing areas of focus, and also serve to document unsuccessful attempts to follow up with a participant or their designated representative or guardian. Progress notes can also be viewed by other program staff. The supports planner in the CFC program can view progress notes for participants that they serve. CCS have the important responsibility to support the person enrolled in waiver services or waiting to be enrolled in navigating the DDA waiver system. The Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services has established guidance which identifies which activities are billable that are directly involved in the coordination of services to support the person. Let's discuss which activities are billable and which are not. The DDA has issued an updated list of examples to ensure that CCS appropriately document the coordination services performed and their agencies accurately submit billing claims for payment of those delivered services. Let's spend a few minutes going over the listed examples. Key billing activities include those that assist people in gaining access to the needed services, assess their needs, support PCP development, and involve ongoing monitoring and follow-up on service implementation and satisfaction. The DDA wants to be sure to provide guidance to support you in accurately documenting your coordination activities and bill according to CMS guidelines. Let's walk through these together. Activities that a CCS performs, which assist people in gaining access to resources that address their health and safety needs, social and educational wants and needs, are considered billable activities. The CCS is responsible for helping the person to identify and choose providers that might be able to address these needs and wants in their chosen community. CCSs are minimally required to perform quarterly monitoring and follow-up assessments of each person receiving waiver services and those waiting for waiver enrollment. The quarterly monitoring and follow-up form has 8 specific categories that, when completed, provide a comprehensive update of the person's progress, challenges, and status change, if any. Remember, this may be completed more frequently, but minimally are required at least once per quarter. CCSs are minimally required to perform quarterly monitoring and follow-up of each person receiving waiver services and of those waiting for waiver enrollment. The quarterly monitoring and follow-up form has 8 specific categories that, when completed, provide a comprehensive update of the person's progress, challenges, and change of status, if any. Remember, this may be completed more frequently, but minimally are required once per quarter. The CCSs are responsible for reviewing reportable incidents, evaluating a need for a new or change in existing services due to changes in health and safety needs, and supports needed to maintain waiver and Medicaid eligibility, etc. The facilitation of the person-centered plan is one of the most important responsibilities the CCS holds. Many of the CCS's activities center around planning, collecting information, and supporting the person in developing this plan for their life. There are several key development stages of the PCP. During the initial discovery and exploration planning process, you are helping the person figure out what's needed to live their best life. PCP billable activities not only includes the planning discussions with the person, potential or current providers, and other chosen team members, but it also includes ensuring you successfully enter the PCP into the LTSS Maryland system and submit it to the DDA for review and approval. It's understood that there are multiple activities that define and ensure successful development, submission, approval of the PCP. These are all billable activities. For example, completing the focus area of exploration is a billable activity. Yes, several of these points do seem repetitive, but they are spelled out to ensure that you are clear on what can be billed. CCSs are responsible for connecting people to providers, programs, and services which address their documented needs and wants. Making these referrals is a billable activity. Again, monitoring and follow-up activities are to occur minimally on a quarterly basis. Remember that all 8 areas are noted on the actual form and should be assessed to ensure that you have completed a comprehensive review of how the person is doing within the 3-month period. All activities supported in this review, including the completion of the actual monitoring and follow-up form in LTSS, is a billable activity. This may include a visit to the provider site to observe the person, a meeting with the person in their home, and visits during provision of services approved in the PCP. While these activities should be documented in the activity notes, this is also a good time where copying and pasting is appropriate. You should copy and paste the summary of the monitoring and follow-up assessment in a progress note during that quarter. We'll talk more about progress notes later in this training, but again, it serves as a means to summarize what's happened in the person's life over the quarter and makes it easier for the development of the PCP. Actual contacts with the person, their identified team members, and all others that have information essential to the support of the participant are billable contacts. These contacts may occur in person, over the phone, or through virtual means like FaceTime or other video phone technology. It also includes email. Unsuccessful attempts to contact the person or their designated representative by phone are not billable. If you've had to leave a message, it is not a billable activity. It is important to document such attempts to contact the participant, however. For example, it is the participant's responsibility to submit financial documentation to EDD for redeterminations. However, you, the CCS, are responsible for documenting your attempts to support the person in maintaining enrollment. If you have left messages, you will need to document this in your progress notes. It serves as clear documentation that you attempted to support the person in maintaining enrollment. Remember, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. The DDA will check for this documentation during its redetermination quality review. Remember, if you're leaving a message for someone, it means it's an unsuccessful attempt to contact them and should not be included in an activity note. Copying and pasting an email or writing a verbatim statement of the interaction is not appropriate. Activities should always be summarized. Case management support during the last 180 days of a person's transition from an institution are billable whether the person is successfully transitioned into the community or remains in an institution. If it takes longer than 180 days, contact the DDA to discuss next steps prior to billing. What services are not billable? While the CCS may be engaged in any number of activities that support the billable activities, some are administration and should not be included in the activity note. There are a lot of required trainings made available to CCSs. In order to perform your responsibilities as a coordinator, the DDA is working to provide better guidance that you can reference at any point and will attempt to keep it up to date for you. That said, training is already included in the rate paid to coordination agencies. For example, today's training should not be documented in an activity note. During the COVID-19 pandemic, face-to-face visits in the participant's home with providers and with other team members has been greatly reduced and in some cases eliminated. As the situation continues to resolve, CCSs have and should begin to visit people. The DDA is aware that it takes time to enter all of the great work done to support the person in the LTSS Maryland system. Maintaining record of services rendered is required and serves as a legal documentation of services rendered by the CCS. It also documents the progress of the person over the duration of their plan year, as discussed earlier. However, the CCS is only able to bill for the service provided, not the time that it takes to summarize the activity in the LTSS system. Remember, activity notes summarize the actual service rendered. The service should be supported in LTSS by entered documentation, such as a completed monitoring and follow-up form, FAE, HRST, and or submitted person-centered plan, for example. While unsuccessful attempts to reach the participant by phone cannot be billed, it is important to document your attempt to reach them in the progress notes section. If you need to leave a message, again, that call should not be billed or documented in an activity note. CCSs should not bill for the delivery of any service that is generally provided to the person by a referred provider. For example, a CCS should not bill for showing a person how to use a laundry machine, even if they demonstrated how to do so during a visit to their home, since this service may be provided by the personal support staff. If you perform the job of a personal supports provider, it is not billable. It actually creates a conflict of interest to do so. Regular supervision with your staff is required to ensure performance is compliant with DDA and CMS requirements for targeted case management service delivery. This is an administrative function. CCS should not be documenting it as a billable activity time spent with supervisors either within your CCS agency or when support from the DDA regional or headquarters staff becomes necessary. DDA headquarter and regional staff are often consulted for support on specific concerns regarding a person and services, and in a supervisory supportive function may provide guidance to support the PCP development. This is not a billable activity and should not be included in the notes as it's considered administrative. From time to time, troubleshooting to support is required from the LTSS help desk and DDA help desk. Again, this is not a billable activity. Any services generally performed under the administration of a non-medical program such as guardianship, child welfare, or child protective services, parole, and probation functions, legal services related to the administration of foster care program such as home investigations and providing transportation are not billable. This does not refer to when the CCS refers an individual to these services. Referrals are billable. Contact with non-eligible individuals related to the management of non-eligible persons' care, unless the person's ineligible status is due to recent disenrollment, is not billable. This simply means that a CCS can bill for activities supporting a person who is attempting to be reinstated in the waiver or has not yet been determined eligible for services but has been referred due to an emergency situation requiring services. Billing for contact with anyone who is not deemed eligible and is not being referred or in need of support of someone who is not permissible. You should document the activity based on when the service was actually provided, not when it was entered into the system. Coordinators may enter all activities for John and Sue in one sitting. They cannot enter that the activities occurred at the same time. LTSS will prevent it, and you will get an error message. You can't be at two places at the same time, even virtually. Let's talk about what a good activity note looks like. It's important that those who have access to the client record are able to get a clear, objective overview of what's happening in the person's life. Each note should be clear and brief. Notes should summarize communications as opposed to any verbatim word for word description of what was discussed. They should be accurate and complete. The reader should understand clearly what transpired during the time frame noted. Notes should be submitted in a timely manner. It's recommended that notes be entered no later than 24 hours after the service has been rendered. You are not the clinician, so don't guess or attempt to diagnose the individual. It goes without saying that notes should be written professionally and should not include cliches or jargon. Documentation should be based on factual information and data, and stereotypes and prejudice should not be included. Steer away from including your opinion, but explore factual information only. Notes typically have a participant details, type of contact, whether it's phone, call, FaceTime, or other visual platform, email, fax, etc. Reason. Every time you write an activity note detailing a service delivered, or even if you're summarizing a couple activity notes in a progress note, you should always be thinking about the reason you're writing the note. Is it clear in your documentation? For example, the reason I'm going to write this note is to let the reader know that a quarterly monitoring and follow-up visit occurred today with Johnny at 5 p.m. via Skype call. I know I'm going to document some of the changes that were noted since my last assessment. Action plan. When documenting the service provided, it's important to know what the next steps to be taken are. Just noting that the HRST assessment was completed and indicated that Johnny is at risk for falls leaves the reader wondering how falls will be avoided. Are new services being requested? Is the supervision status changing? Is there a follow-up appointment that needs to be completed to assess why he is falling? Be clear about who is supposed to complete the next step, and then plan for the next meeting or follow-up. It's important to be sure that you avoid bias by leaving personal feelings and assumption out of the note. Documentation should be factual, and if there are unknowns that require investigation, it's good to say that as part of the follow-up plan. Document any essential observation which are important for the reader to better understand what occurred during the service delivery. For example, if John is calm but then appears to fidget or act nervous when a staff person comes into the room, it might be important to note, such as John appeared nervous when staff person entered the room by suddenly fidgeting with his hands. Any unusual behavior might be important to note in the event that there's an allegation or a concern that might be raised. Here's an example section of an activity note. During the quarterly monitoring and follow-up visit on 5/1, it was discussed that Johnny has been self-directing his services for 6 months. He continues to struggle with the management of his chosen staff. 3 staff have quit since his last quarterly monitoring and follow-up. Is it okay in your note to say that Johnny is unable to supervise his staff and that you feel it's best for him to move back to traditional services? Stating that you feel he should transition is merely opinion and should be deleted from your note. What might you indicate as your next steps given this information, though? You might need to explore why staff have quit. Are there behavioral challenges? Would he like some support managing his staff? Perhaps a support broker might be a helpful service to request. Remember, the note does not need to detail everything said, but should summarize services, if applicable, clearly ensuring that the category of billable services rendered is noted. Let's review some key considerations. Notes should always be factual. Phrases such as, I think, it's my opinion, it seems to me, I assume, probably, are the beginnings of opinion statements and should be avoided. In this day and age where social media informs many, it's important to remember to stay professional. If subpoenaed, you may have to read your note aloud. Are you okay with that? Additionally, be careful to keep notes simple and understandable. Avoid acronyms, clinical or DDA jargon, which will require further explanation if not clearly noted. Here are a few problem examples. After asking for additional funding for personal care when he was already fully staffed, I told him the plan would not get approved. Bye, Felicia. Johnny's parents were pissed off and argued for additional supports, although they had no documentation to support their request. Please remember to summarize your communication professionally. With some slight tweaks, you've got a more professional statement. Johnny's parents appeared upset during the meeting and argued for additional services, although there was no support for their service request. One key responsibility of the CCS is to monitor the health and safety of the person. How are services supporting them and moving safely through their environment? Is there any threat to their immediate safety? Are there health concerns that need to be addressed? Is the person adjusting well following a recent medical procedure? If you just completed an HRST, you should summarize this note any results that help to address safety concerns. Just documenting that you completed it is not helpful. When you are preparing for the person's annual PCP, you should be able to go back through your activity notes and get a good picture of how this person's health has been over the plan year. You can always give a summary of your results in the progress notes as well for a quick look back in preparation for your PCP. If you question the results or need additional supports in making a determination, you should note that in your activity note, part of your plan may be to seek coaching from a clinical nurse. When providing services, you should always be assessing for change in needs. This could be something you observed yourself or was reported directly by the person themselves, provider, loved one, or chosen team member. Always be sure to begin to establish a plan to address that need. You may need to revise the PCP to request an increase in services, change providers, or request a new service altogether. Whether you're monitoring to see how well a service is going, whether the person is progressing on their goal with a provider or something else, it's important to get a read on the person's satisfaction with their services. If they are unhappy, find out why and try to plan next steps with them to address that. You may need to seek out support from other team members. Remember, document. Could one of your coordinators cover your case while you're on vacation? Occasionally, case note assignments shift, or other coordinators or supervisors need to step in to cover you while you're absent. They should be able to read your activity notes and progress notes and get up to speed. This is one reason why progress notes can be helpful. While activity notes are currently observable within an agency, only progress notes are viewable between agencies if a transfer does occur. It's always good to have minimally a quarterly monitoring and follow-up summary in your progress notes. You will also want to have, again, unsuccessful attempts to contact a person documented in the progress notes section. As previously stated, activities are the documentation which results in billing and is the required method of detailing service delivery. Progress notes can provide a quick overview where someone doesn't have to read all the activity notes to get a comprehensive review. Now we walk through how to actually enter the activity notes and progress notes in LTSS Maryland. Billing for targeted case management services is based on a 15-minute unit. LTSS Maryland does not require the CCS to enter based on the 15-minute increments. You just enter your start, stop time, or duration, and the system will submit based on this approved billing unit. Let's walk through how you will enter your activity notes directly into the system. Remember, billing only occurs through the documentation of activities in an activity note section. Upon opening the person's record in LTSS, you will open the Case Management tab. There you will see a tab for activities. Click this tab to begin entering your activity note. Remember, it's expected that you enter notes no later than 24 hours after service delivery. Click Add Activity. Enter the date the activity was performed. Then you'll need to identify the category label of the activity. While there are numerous activity labels to choose from, you will choose the one that best describes the purpose of the service provided. For example, if you are documenting the PCP planning meeting you held with providers in preparation for the PCP meeting, you may select Person-Centered Plan Revision or Development from the drop-down menu. Next, you will indicate the type, or rather how the service was rendered. Was it in person, by phone, letter? Select the option. In the description areas where you will write your concise, clear, and fact-based description of the activity service rendered. Is there anything else that would be helpful to know in this note? Was the service referral request sent to the provider? The CCS should note the next steps for moving this plan to submission. Again, the note is not verbatim. It can be a simple note that basically summarizes the service delivery. Be sure to include essential concerns, challenges, and the next steps as applicable. It is important that you keep track of when you perform the activities, especially if you are serving multiple participants on the same day. Remember, LTSS Maryland will prevent you from overlapping service times for 2 or more people. Next, indicate the start and stop time. You can either indicate the start time and duration or just enter the end time for the duration of the documented activity and then save. Once successfully saved, you will receive confirmation. Please note that if you perform the activity, as in this case, on 4/22, but entered it or edited it later, the system documents the date of the most recent change. Again, it's important to enter activity notes no later than 24 hours following the service activity has been rendered. If for any reason you are required to go back and edit a note, you simply click Edit or Delete in the Action column. You have 365 days to edit notes following the date the activity was actually rendered. In the DDA auditing process, you may be required to edit the note if it included non-billable items or inaccurately reflected the billed activity. It is important that your notes are supported in the system by documentation. This may be a completed person-centered plan, an uploaded behavior intervention plan, the completed HRST, etc. Notes are verified in the quality review process by obtaining and reviewing documentation in the system to support what's been built. LTSS maintains a history of all entered activity and progress notes. If for any reason the note once entered needs to be revised, version history will be maintained for review if needed. Progress notes are entered in the same way once you click on the Progress Note tab instead of the Activities tab. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's walk through a few examples. On 6/19, this coordinator called to speak to Johnny in his home during what was supposed to be the time he was with his personal support worker. He picked up the phone and said he was sleeping. This is the fourth time this has happened. I don't know what the PS worker is doing, but it ain't working with Johnny. Remember to keep your opinions to yourself. Slang is inappropriate and the tone of this note is aggressive. Remember to stay objective and professional. An edit might include 3 times earlier this month, I have also documented that the personal supports worker scheduled to work with Johnny was not available during the period of time scheduled. Is there anything else you might add? It might be helpful to include a quick progress note to alert the reader of a trend. This will help to remind you at the time that it's necessary to revise the PCP. And in case you might have to actually facilitate an investigation. I verified that the service was billed during the time, although services were not delivered. Although no billing occurred for the 3 previous incidents according to the FMS account. An incident report for 4/19 has been submitted to report potential fraudulent billing. A meeting has been scheduled for 4/22 at 3 p.m. to discuss Johnny's continued need for personal supports, his ability to fulfill his employer responsibilities, and additional supports he may need to do so. Remember, it's important that your note be easy to understand, give the reason for the visit, action taken, plans or next steps, and who might be required to complete them. On 4/19, the date of entry of this progress notes, held pre-planning meeting with providers, Johnny and his mother on 2/15 after meeting with my supervisor, Miss CCS Super, to discuss his unique needs. Provider X was not certain they would be able to address his needs virtually. Johnny wants to check with provider B to see if they're better able to support him virtually. First, the DDA is expecting that all activity notes be entered no later than 24 hours from the date of the rendered service. In this note, the CCS documented a service provided way back in February, but on April 19th. Remember, the time spent with your supervisor or receiving technical assistance or support from DDA is not billable. Do not include non-billable activity in your activity notes. In your progress notes, you may note and provide a summary that tells more of a story, but only if necessary. Remember, progress notes should provide a comprehensive overview. It is important to document unsuccessful attempts to contact the participant in the progress notes. Note that the CCS didn't summarize every category of the monitoring and follow-up assessment in their note. Anyone can review the actual monitoring and follow-up form by opening the form in LTSS. However, the CCS does summarize areas of concern or change. At 2:15 p.m., I conducted a quarterly monitoring and follow-up visit with Jane. Her mother was doing much better and no longer needed the support of her niece for meal preparations for Jane. Miss X actually reported that Jane helps to tear up her own lettuce for her salads now. Jane seemed happy that her mother shared her new success. No other changes to her functioning or satisfaction were noted. My next visit will be the comprehensive quarterly monitoring and follow-up in June. Quick reminder, monitoring and follow-up visits should always be comprehensive and completed quarterly. Progress note. Your progress note again is not billable. However, if completed minimally for the quarterly monitoring and follow-up visit, you have an easy summary that can be used in the preparation of the annual PCP meeting without having to review individual activity notes. It makes it easier for a supervisor or even a new coordinator to get up to speed quickly. Let's read this example of a progress note. During the last quarterly monitoring and follow-up visit, Jane's mother sustained a sprained ankle and was not able to walk for a month. Jane's niece was asked to come and live with them for the time to assist Jane in preparing her meals. A follow-up focused visit revealed that Jane's mom is better and Jane has actually made progress in preparing her own meals. As part of our conclusion, let's review. Training, consultation with the DDA, LTSS, or help desk are not billable activities. Do not include these in your activity note. If you're not sure that an activity is a billable one, ask your supervisor, if necessary, your DDA CCS squad member who is ready to support you. The activity note is documentation of the good work that you do to support people receiving waiver services or waiting for enrollment, and it's required. It's your responsibility to complete them in a timely manner. Remember, activity notes should be brief, documenting the time it actually took to complete the activity, not the time that it took to write the note. Thank you for your attention during this training. If you have any questions, please reach out to your supervisor and or your DDA CCS regional lead. Thank you so much for your continued service in the role of community services and your attention during this training today. Upon the review of your agency's submitted training spreadsheets to the DDA, a certificate of completion will be issued for you to maintain for your training card records. Thank you.